this will now take us to our office in Germany. Let me introduce you to Manuela Finger, who is a partner in our Munich office. Manuela's particular specialty is IP, including soft IP and information technology, as well as commercial matters relating to intellectual property generally. Manuela has a particular focus in communication technology, digital media, entertainment, and fashion and the retail industry. So over to you in Munich, Manuela.
Thank you, Scott, for the introduction. And again, good morning, Ottawa. So you can distinguish me from my colleagues by the slightly longer hair I wear today. So, and well, let's look at Germany. And maybe I start with a brief introduction. So what would you have there? So it's 82 million people living there. GDP in 2015 has been 3.36 trillion US dollar, and GDP per capita 47,400, which I think is fairly close to Canada. The main industries are iron, steel, coal, chemicals, machinery, of course, vehicles, of course, machine tools, electronics, food and beverages, shipbuildings and textiles. And export and imports is really very much the same. It's machineries again, vehicles, chemicals, metals, manufacturers, foodstuff and textiles. If you look at the trade between Canada and Germany, I picked 2014. So in that year, Canada exported goods in the amount of 3.4 billion euro into Germany, and Germany exported goods in the amount of 8.6 billion euro into Canada. Germany imported mainly raw materials, while Canada mainly imported cars or car parts as well as machinery, and both countries exchanged data processing equipment, electrical products, chemical products and optical products. What is specific about Germany? So foreign investment is generally welcome. You don't have any substantial restrictions for foreign investors, but instead foreign investors are very much subject to the same conditions as German investors. English is a fairly common language in business, and most of the higher educated Germans would also have a good command of at least one further language, including predominantly French, and then followed by Spanish, Italian or Eastern European languages. What I haven't put on the slides are a few stereotypes, like the Germans' love for their cars, for beer, and for a complete lack of a sense of humor, and that Germany has been voted the least funny country in the world. But what I have put on the slides is that the Germans love Canada, so Canada has really a very good reputation in Germany, including business. So Canadians are generally perceived as being really, well, easygoing, straightforward, and yeah. So that's apparently, obviously, a good start. If we look at opportunities, Germany is traditionally really very much oriented towards manufacturing, and German manufacturers of predominantly cars and machines, but also chemical, electronic products, etc., have traditionally a really strong foothold on the global markets. You have a lot of industries in the forefront of technologies. Unfortunately, when I heard my French colleagues, we are less dominant in fashion and luxury. I hope that will change in the future at some point in time. But it's, as I said, it's mostly manufacturing and technology. There are roughly 1,400 hidden champions in Germany, which I think is, well, per sectors, which I think is slightly half of all hidden champions in the world. Although there is a slight caveat that I've taken that from a German source, so they may have well defined the respective sectors to come to that conclusion. But anyway, it's a big market and it's a healthy economy. One further particularity about Germany are the German Mittelstand companies. So these are small and medium-sized entities with mostly up to 500 employees and up to 50 million euro annual turnover, although there are also some Mittelstand companies with really much higher annual turnover. The Mittelstand companies actually comprise more than 99% of all German corporations, and they produce 52% of the total economic output. They are mostly family-owned. Many are also managed by their owners, which leads to certain particulars in transactions. So it's a slightly more personal thing to the owners, which you have to just take into account. And they are usually having a high equity ratio, and amongst them, of course, many hidden champions, and they are usually truly international. If you would like to start a business in Germany and just supply goods and services, that's quite straightforward. There are no general restrictions for Canadian suppliers. You don't really need a physical presence. Language is usually not an issue. And then what my colleagues said before, you have CETA now, we will see what it will be like. If you establish a business in Germany, you can say basically everything is possible. You can have just a representative office without a trading activity. You can just have a branch of your foreign entity, although it must be registered, or you can have a subsidiary in a variety of legal forms. What you have to bear in mind is the registered filing, so you would have to file your activity with the commercial register. If you would like to establish a GmbH, which is the German limited liability company, there is a notarization requirement for the deed. So that has a certain cost element which has to be considered when setting up your business in Germany. But otherwise, it's a fairly straightforward process. It takes usually a couple of days to maybe 2 weeks. And if you consider just buying a shelf company, that will be even quicker. That can be possible within a day. If you look at acquiring a business, doing a transaction in Germany, then most of the deals are actually auction processes with strict timings. If you do a share deal, that would be very similar to what you would expect in Canada. And as I already said, there are certain notarization requirements which you should bear in mind. For example, if you acquire a GmbH or if you transfer real estate. So in which case the notary public would read out the whole deed. You have to, there's a time and cost element. If you look at public M&A in Germany, the German Takeover Act requires a purchaser to make a mandatory takeover offer if the purchaser gains more than 30% of the voting rights. And both for mandatory and voluntary takeover offers, there are strict rules as to the purchase price. It must be appropriate. It is calculated based on the average market price, and depending on the circumstances, you might even be required to offer a fairly increased purchase price. Taxation and deal structuring. This is just to give you a slight overview on what you just find in Germany. The corporate income tax is 15%, which is either on the worldwide income if the company is located in Germany, or on specific German-sourced income. You have to add the solidarity surcharge, and you have to add the trade tax, and at the end of the day, you might end up with an overall effective tax rate in the area of 27 to 30%. It might be higher in certain cases. What you have to take into account is the real estate transfer tax, and which you have to consider that in the structuring of the transaction. So if you transfer real estate or a company owning real estate, you will have that real estate transfer tax. Merger control, applying to all investments in Germany, you require a notification and clearance if the acquisition is a concentration, qualifies as a concentration. So if you acquire the majority of the shares or voting rights, and cumulatively, if the parties meet certain turnover thresholds, both together and individually. And then if you are a foreign investor and buy a company in Germany, the German Ministry of Economics can review the transaction and can verify whether that transaction has an impact on the interest of the German public order, and then possibly intervene depending on the outcome of their evaluation. So if you invest in a business specializing in military technology, IT security products, or satellite data, there is a mandatory formal notification requirement, and the German Ministry of Economics would then have 3 months to review the transaction. So as a result, you would obviously, in many cases, just postpone closing until then. In all other industry areas, there is not a mandatory formal notification requirement, but the German Ministry of Economics can review, so has the option to review the transaction within 3 months following signing. So in order to avoid any issues in that respect, you would usually apply and file for a negative clearance. That usually takes around 1 month, so it's something which can be done or started really at the start of the transaction process. And what else do you have to bear in mind? My colleagues addressed that already. It's very similar in Germany, so you can do an asset deal and can do cherry picking, but that wouldn't help with employees. So as soon as your asset deal constitutes a sale of a business or even a part of a business, the employee relationships would be transferred automatically, so there's nothing, you can't avoid that. And as Scott said, I'm an IP lawyer, so I struggled really hard to tell you something about IP and what is specific and the pitfalls of IP, but unfortunately there isn't so much. It's quite straightforward. The only thing you have to bear in mind is that Germany, as many continental or many countries in continental Europe, follows the so-called droit d'auteur system. So no work made for hire. You have to have a chain of title in terms of copyright, etc. But this is something which is very easily being handled. So sadly, having nothing to say as an IP lawyer, I will probably stop here, but if you have any questions in Germany, my colleagues and I are here to help. Many thanks.
Manuela, thank you indeed. That was terrific.